At the hearing against my daughter-in-law to determine the custody of my 6-year-old grandchildren, my grandson swore to the judge that I was the meanest grandmother in the world. The evidence I presented made everyone question who the bad influence really was. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The courtroom fell silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. The judge, the court reporter, my lawyer, even the bailiff by the door. But the only gaze that truly pierced my heart was Tommy's. My 6-year-old grandson stared at me with such conviction as he repeated those terrible words Vanessa had taught him. Grandma Sandra is mean. She's the meanest grandma in the whole world. My chest tightened. Each word stabbed deeper than any physical wound could. This little boy who once ran into my arms without hesitation, who begged to sleep at my house on weekends, who called me his cookie grandma because we always baked together, now looked at me like I was a stranger. No, worse than a stranger. Like I was someone to be feared. Vanessa sat beside him, her hand on his small shoulder, her face a perfect mask of concerned motherhood. To anyone who didn't know better, she appeared to be comforting her child through a difficult moment. But I saw the slight upward curl of her lips, the satisfied gleam in her eyes. She had orchestrated this moment perfectly. "Tommy," the judge said gently, "can you tell me why your grandmother is mean?" Tommy looked up at his mother, who gave him an encouraging nod. "She tries to take me away from Mommy," he said, his voice small but rehearsed. "She says bad things about Mommy. She makes my sister Emma cry." Every accusation was a distortion of the truth. I had never tried to take the children. I had simply requested my court-appointed visitation rights that Vanessa repeatedly denied. I never spoke ill of her in front of the children, though God knows I had reason to. And Emma's tears? They came when I had to return her to her mother's house after our visits, not from anything I had done. I glanced at Emma, sitting quietly beside her court-appointed advocate. At 6 years old, Tommy's twin, she seemed withdrawn, her eyes fixed on her small hands folded in her lap. She wouldn't look at me, but she wouldn't look at her mother either. This nightmare began 3 years ago when my son Jason married Vanessa after a whirlwind romance. I had my concerns from the beginning: how quickly Vanessa moved in, how she gradually isolated Jason from his friends, how she subtly criticized his relationship with me. But I stayed quiet. Jason seemed happy, and the twins adored her. Who was I to interfere? Then came the accident. Jason's company vehicle colliding with a drunk driver on a rainy night. My only child, gone in an instant. The grief nearly destroyed me. But I had to stay strong for Tommy and Emma, who'd just lost their father. I tried to be there for them, to maintain that connection, to preserve their memories of Jason. That's when Vanessa began to change. Or perhaps she simply stopped pretending. Visits became difficult to arrange. Phone calls went unanswered. The children seemed different each time I saw them. Quieter, nervous, often hungry and wearing clothes that no longer fit. When I gently raised concerns, Vanessa accused me of criticizing her parenting. When I offered help, she said I was overstepping. When I mentioned Jason's name, she said I was dwelling in the past and upsetting the children. Then came the day I picked up Emma from school for our court-approved visit and found bruises on her arm. When I asked her what happened, she burst into tears and begged me not to tell her mother she had told me. That was the moment I knew I had to fight for custody, no matter the cost. I never imagined it would lead to this moment. My own grandson testifying against me, believing I was the villain in this story. "Mrs. Lawson," my lawyer whispered, snapping me back to the present. "It's time to present our evidence." I nodded, stealing one more glance at Tommy. Behind his rehearsed hatred, I caught a flicker of confusion in his eyes. That tiny glimpse gave me the strength to stand up and fight for what these children truly needed: safety, stability, and the love their father would have wanted them to have. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there, flashing like warning beacons I chose to ignore for the sake of peace. For my son, Jason's happiness. For the twins. Vanessa entered our lives like a whirlwind. Jason met her at a colleague's wedding, and within 3 months, they were engaged. 6 months later, married. Everything happened so fast that I barely had time to process the changes. "Mom, when you know, you just know," Jason had said, his eyes bright with the kind of love that blinds you to reality. I smiled and hugged him, swallowing my concerns. After all, who was I to question his judgment? He was 32, successful, and had always been sensible. The first red flag appeared during wedding planning. I had offered to help with the arrangements, perhaps bake the cake, a family tradition spanning generations. Vanessa's response was polite but firm. "That's so sweet, Sandra. But I've already hired a professional. This needs to be perfect." Her emphasis on perfect made me feel like my efforts would somehow tarnish her special day. Jason looked uncomfortable but said nothing. That became a pattern. Vanessa making decisions, Jason acquiescing, me stepping back. After the wedding, the distance grew. Sunday dinners at my house, a tradition since Jason was a boy, became monthly, then quarterly events. Each time, Vanessa had an excuse. She was tired, busy, or just wanted a quiet weekend at home. Jason stopped coming alone, saying, "We're a package deal now, Mom. When the twins were born, I thought things would improve. Surely Vanessa would appreciate help with 2 newborns." I cleared my schedule, prepared to be the doting grandmother. But Vanessa had her mother move in instead, a woman who lived 6 states away and whom Jason had met only twice. "Vanessa's more comfortable with her own mom right now," Jason explained, not meeting my eyes. "Just give her time." Time. I gave her years. I bit my tongue when she criticized how I held the babies. I said nothing when she reorganized the nursery I had helped Jason prepare. I remained silent when she rejected the handmade quilts I'd spent months creating for the twins. The most telling moment came when the twins were 3. I'd bought them small tricycles for their birthday. Nothing extravagant. Just colorful little bikes with streamers on the handlebars. Vanessa looked at them and said, "Oh, we don't have room for these. The children already have too many toys." That evening, I overheard her on the phone with someone laughing. "Sandra bought these hideous tricycles as if we'd let the kids ride those death traps." Jason found me in the kitchen, tears streaming down my face. For once, he confronted Vanessa. Their argument was fierce, with words I'd never heard my son use before. The next day, he brought the tricycles to my house, asking if I could keep them there for when the kids visited. "She's just protective, Mom," he said, sounding tired. "The kids are her world. That was the problem. They were her world, not ours. Not a shared joy, but her exclusive territory." Then came the accident. A rainy Thursday night. A drunk driver. My son gone forever. I still remember getting that call. How my legs gave out. How I couldn't breathe. Through my grief, I worried about the twins. About how to help them understand that Daddy wasn't coming home. But Vanessa shut me out completely. "We need space to process this as a family," she said at the funeral, standing between me and the twins. "I'll call when we're ready for visitors." That call never came. When I finally saw the twins 2 weeks later, they seemed confused about who I was. Tommy, who used to climb into my lap the moment I arrived, hid behind Vanessa's legs. Emma reached for me, but Vanessa pulled her back, saying she was too emotional right now. I had to file for grandparent visitation rights just to see them. The court granted me 1 weekend a month and weekly phone calls. Even those became battlegrounds. The children were too busy for calls. They were sick on my weekends. When I did get them, they arrived hungry, unwashed, and wearing clothes too small or inappropriate for the season. Emma once whispered, "Mommy says we can't tell you stuff, or you'll take us away." I started documenting everything: the missed visits, the children's physical condition, their concerning comments. Each time I expressed concern, Vanessa accused me of trying to undermine her. The final straw came 9 months ago. During a rare approved visit, Emma came out of the bathroom in tears. When I gently asked what was wrong, she lifted her shirt to show me finger-shaped bruises across her back. "Mommy's friend Rick did it," she whispered. "He said I was being too noisy." That night, after returning the children, I called Child Protective Services. The investigation found nothing conclusive. Vanessa blamed the marks on a fall at the playground. But something in me hardened. I knew then I couldn't stand by anymore. These children needed protection. I filed for custody the next day, setting in motion the events that led to this courtroom. To my grandson calling me the meanest grandmother in the world, to the mountain of evidence I was about to present. Evidence that would show exactly who was harming these innocent children. For the first time since Jason's death, I felt his presence beside me, urging me forward. "Fight for them, Mom," I could almost hear him say. "Don't give up." And I wouldn't. Not when their safety and futures hung in the balance. The first real evidence I gathered came from an unexpected source. Miss Winters, the twins' kindergarten teacher. I had gone to the school for a parent-teacher conference, a right I still maintained despite Vanessa's objections. Miss Winters, a petite woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice, seemed nervous when I arrived. She kept glancing at the door as if worried someone might walk in. "Mrs. Lawson," she said quietly, closing the classroom door. "I'm glad you came. There are some things we need to discuss about the twins." My heart immediately sank. Are they having trouble with their schoolwork? She shook her head. "It's not that. They're both bright children. It's..." She hesitated, then pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. "I've been documenting some concerns." Inside were notes dating back months. Emma coming to school in the same clothes 3 days in a row. Tommy falling asleep during morning circle time, telling Miss Winters they had to stay up for Mommy's friends. Both children often hungry, devouring their school lunches and asking for more. "Last week," Miss Winters said, lowering her voice further, "Tommy told me they don't have dinner at home sometimes because Mommy forgets." She showed me drawings the twins had made during free art time. Emma's pictures showed a house with dark clouds hanging over it, stick figures with frowns. Tommy's depicted what looked like adults lying on sofas, bottles littering the floor. "I've raised these concerns with the school counselor," Miss Winters continued, "but Mrs. Martinez, Vanessa, always has an explanation. The children are dramatic, or going through a phase." She brought in doctor's notes saying Emma has food allergies that cause behavioral issues. I frowned. "Emma doesn't have food allergies." I suspected as much. Miss Winters bit her lip. "Mrs. Lawson, I've been teaching for 22 years. I know the difference between a child with allergies and a child who's not being properly cared for." She hesitated, then added, "The school is hesitant to file an official report. Mrs. Martinez is quite intimidating. She's threatened to sue when concerns were raised previously." "You're afraid?" I realized. Miss Winters looked ashamed. "I have my own children to support. I can't risk my job. But..." She pushed the folder toward me. "You can use this. I've made copies of everything." That night, I couldn't sleep. The folder sat on my nightstand, its contents haunting me. In my mind's eye, I saw the twins, hungry, tired, confused. I imagined Jason looking down, his heart breaking at what was happening to his children. The next morning, I received a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Evidence you need. The sender was Martin, Vanessa's ex-boyfriend from before she met Jason. They'd dated for 3 years, and he had reached out after seeing my name in court records. His email contained photos and videos from when he and Vanessa lived together. Vanessa drunk at noon, screaming at his young nephew who was visiting. Vanessa throwing dishes during an argument. Text messages showing her threatening to harm herself if he left her. She was manipulative and volatile, Martin wrote. I didn't speak up when she married your son because I was just glad to be free of her. I will testify if needed. Those kids deserve better. Armed with this evidence, I hired a private investigator. The report he delivered 2 weeks later made my blood run cold. Vanessa was leaving the twins alone several nights a week, sometimes until the early morning hours. She had a revolving door of men staying over, some with criminal records. The children were often unfed, unbathed, and unsupervised. The investigator had photographed Emma waiting by the school's front door for 40 minutes after pickup time, while Vanessa sat in her car in the parking lot, apparently asleep or intoxicated. He'd documented Tommy wandering the neighborhood alone at dusk, knocking on neighbors' doors asking for food. Most damning was the audio recording from outside their home, capturing Vanessa screaming at the children. If you tell Grandma anything, they'll take you away and you'll never see me again. Is that what you want? To be all alone? The twins' voices small and frightened. No, Mommy, we won't tell. With trembling hands, I compiled everything. Miss Winter's documentation, Martin's evidence, the investigator's report, my own detailed records of missed visits and concerning observations. I'd been gathering pieces of a terrible puzzle, and now the completed picture was impossible to ignore. When I presented it all to my lawyer, Gloria, she reviewed it silently, her expression growing grimmer with each page. This is compelling, Sandra, she said finally. But Vanessa will fight back hard. She'll paint you as a vindictive mother-in-law trying to steal her children. Are you prepared for how ugly this might get? I thought of Tommy's fearful eyes, of Emma's bruises, of the desperate way they ate when they were with me, as if unsure when their next meal would come. I don't care what she says about me, I said firmly. These children need someone to fight for them. Jason can't do it anymore. It has to be me. Gloria nodded, a new respect in her eyes. Then let's file for emergency custody. With this evidence, we have a strong case. That filing set in motion the hearing where Tommy would call me the meanest grandmother in the world. But I knew the truth now, and I wouldn't back down. Not when those children's safety was at stake. Even if they hated me for it, I would protect them. That's what being a grandmother really means. The days leading up to the custody hearing were the longest of my life. Each night, I'd lie awake imagining the twins alone in that house, wondering if they were safe, if they had eaten dinner, if anyone had tucked them in with a bedtime story. I'd stare at the ceiling, remembering how Jason always said goodnight to his stuffed dinosaur until he was 12 years old, how he'd want his children to have the same sense of security he'd grown up with. Gloria, my attorney, warned me repeatedly about what to expect. Vanessa will use every weapon in her arsenal, she said during our final preparation meeting. She'll paint you as controlling, as interfering, as unable to accept that you're not the parent. I know I'm not their parent, I replied quietly. I'm just trying to be what their father would want me to be. Their protector. Gloria's expression softened. The judge will see the evidence, Sandra. But you need to prepare yourself for how the children might behave in court. If Vanessa has been coaching them, she has, I interrupted. Tommy barely looks at me anymore. Emma just seems scared all the time. Then be ready for them to say hurtful things. Can you handle that? I thought about it honestly. Could I bear to hear my grandchildren, whom I loved more than life itself, say terrible things about me? Things they'd been trained to say? I have to, I finally answered. Because nobody else is standing up for them. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in a simple navy blue dress. Nothing flashy, nothing that could be interpreted as trying too hard. I wore the small heart-shaped locket Jason had given me for Mother's Day when he was 16, his school picture still inside. It felt like carrying a piece of him with me. When I arrived at the courthouse, my neighbor Martha was waiting outside. She had offered to come for moral support, but I hadn't expected to see her there so early. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, giving me a quick hug. I kept thinking about those babies, and about you, going through this alone. Her kindness nearly broke me. Since Jason's death, I'd become accustomed to handling everything by myself. Having someone simply show up without being asked was an unexpected comfort. The whole neighborhood is pulling for you, Martha added. We've all seen how things changed after Jason passed, how those children started looking different. Inside, the courtroom felt cavernous and cold. Vanessa was already there, dressed in a conservative beige suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked like the perfect grieving widow and devoted mother, exactly the image she'd cultivated since the funeral. The one time people saw her, she performed flawlessly. The twins sat on a bench outside with their court-appointed guardian ad litem, a stern woman named Mrs. Patel who had interviewed me extensively. Tommy was kicking his feet against the bench. Emma was sucking her thumb, a habit she'd supposedly outgrown 2 years ago, according to Vanessa's angry comments during handoffs. When Tommy saw me, he immediately turned away, pressing himself against Mrs. Patel's side. Emma gave me the briefest glance before looking down at her shoes. The rejection stung, but I understood. They had been conditioned to fear me, to see me as a threat to their family. They look tired, Martha whispered beside me. They did. Both had dark circles under their eyes. Tommy's shirt was buttoned incorrectly, and Emma's hair hadn't been brushed properly. These details wouldn't be obvious to the judge, but they screamed volumes to me. When the proceedings began, I listened as Vanessa's attorney portrayed me as an overbearing mother-in-law who couldn't accept that my son had married and started his own family. He described how I had harassed Vanessa with constant calls and unannounced visits, how I undermined her parenting at every turn, how I used my considerable financial resources to try to buy the children's affection. Each accusation was a distortion of reality. My harassment had been worried calls when the children missed school. My undermining had been feeding hungry children and washing their dirty clothes. My buying affection had been providing necessities Vanessa neglected. Then came the children's testimony in the judge's chambers. Tommy went first. When he returned, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he wouldn't look at either me or his mother. Emma went next. She was in there much longer. While we waited, Vanessa's phone kept buzzing. She checked it repeatedly, growing increasingly agitated. At one point, she excused herself to take a call in the hallway. Through the partially open door, I could hear her harsh whispers. "No, you can't come over tonight. Because I'm in court, you idiot. No, the kids will be there. I don't care what you want." When Emma finally emerged from the judge's chambers, she looked directly at me for the first time that day. Something in her expression had changed. A flicker of hope, perhaps, or relief. My heart raced. Had she told the truth? Later, I would learn that Emma had indeed started to open up to the judge. She had mentioned Rick, Vanessa's boyfriend who had left the bruises. She had described nights left alone while Mommy went to parties. But when asked directly if she wanted to live with her mother or grandmother, she had frozen, too frightened to answer. As we moved back into open court, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever happened next, I had done everything possible to protect these children. I had broken my silence, gathered evidence, and fought against all odds. Jason would be proud of that at least. The judge called for Tommy to testify in open court, a decision that surprised both attorneys. And that's when my grandson, his small voice shaking, called me the meanest grandmother in the world. In that moment, looking at his frightened face, I made a silent promise. Even if they hate me now, I will never stop fighting for you. Someday, you'll understand why. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence regarding the children's living conditions, Gloria said, her voice steady and professional. The judge nodded, and Gloria began methodically displaying the documentation we had gathered. School attendance records showing frequent absences and tardiness. Photos from the investigator showing the twins wandering unsupervised in the neighborhood. Medical records indicating missed appointments and delays in necessary vaccinations. Vanessa's attorney objected repeatedly, claiming the evidence was obtained unethically or taken out of context. The judge overruled most objections, his expression growing more concerned with each new piece of evidence. Then came Miss Winter's testimony. She spoke quietly but firmly about her observations, the children's hunger, their fatigue, their concerning artwork, and their troubling comments about home life. Tommy told me that sometimes they eat cereal for dinner because Mommy's door is locked, she said. Emma frequently comes to school in the same clothes, sometimes with stains from the previous day. Vanessa's face remained composed, but I noticed her fingers gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Next came Martin's testimony. He described Vanessa's volatile behavior during their relationship and her tendency to manipulate others to get what she wanted. He showed text messages where she had threatened self-harm when he tried to end their relationship and described incidents of rage that left him fearing for his safety. I believe she is capable of using those children as pawns, he concluded. I've seen her manipulate people before. She doesn't see the harm she causes. Throughout these testimonies, I kept my expression neutral. Inside, though, I was trembling with a mixture of vindication and sorrow. These weren't revelations to me, but hearing them stated plainly in court made them feel both more real and more tragic. Then came the moment that would change everything. Gloria played the audio recording the investigator had captured. Vanessa. Screaming at the twins, threatening them, telling them they would be taken away if they spoke to me about what happened at home. The courtroom fell silent. The judge's expression darkened. Even Vanessa's attorney looked taken aback. Mrs. Martinez, the judge said, his voice stern. Would you care to explain this recording? Vanessa straightened in her chair. That recording is taken out of context, she said smoothly. I was simply explaining to the children about court procedures. They were confused and frightened by all this legal action their grandmother has initiated. The judge didn't look convinced. And the allegations of neglect? The children being left alone at night? The missed school days? Your Honor, I'm a single mother doing my best, Vanessa replied, her voice catching in a practiced way. Since Jason's death, it's been a struggle. Mrs. Lawson has never approved of me, and she's using this tragedy to try to take my children away. I bit my tongue. Her ability to twist the truth was remarkable. For a moment, I feared the judge might be swayed by her performance. Then a small voice broke through the tension. That's not true. Everyone turned. Emma had stood up from her seat beside Mrs. Patel. Her small face was pale but determined. Emma, honey, sit down, Vanessa said sharply. But Emma took a step forward. Mommy does leave us alone. A lot. She says we're big kids and we don't need babysitters. Mrs. Patel placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder but didn't stop her. Tommy and me, we get scared when it's dark, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. Sometimes we're really hungry. Grandma Sandra always makes sure we have food. Vanessa's face contorted with fury. Emma, stop talking right now. Mrs. Martinez, the judge warned. Do not address the child. Emma looked directly at the judge, her small hands clenched at her sides. Mommy told Tommy to say Grandma is mean. She made us practice. She said if we didn't do it right, they'd take us away forever. Tommy, who had been silent until now, suddenly burst into tears. I don't want to lie anymore, he sobbed. I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't mean it. The judge immediately called for a recess, ordering that the children be taken to a separate room with Mrs. Patel. As they were led out, Emma glanced back at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in months. Trust. When court resumed, the judge addressed Vanessa directly. Mrs. Martinez, the evidence presented today, coupled with the children's own statements, raises serious concerns about your fitness as a parent. Vanessa began to protest, but the judge held up his hand. I am ordering a full investigation by Child Protective Services. Until that investigation is complete, temporary custody of the children will be granted to Mrs. Lawson. The air left my lungs in a rush. Temporary custody. The twins would be safe. Vanessa exploded. You can't do this. They're my children. She's turning them against me. As bailiffs moved to contain her outburst, the judge continued, his voice firm. Mrs. Martinez, this outburst only reinforces my concerns. You will have supervised visitation rights pending the investigation's outcome. I sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement might somehow reverse this decision. Beside me, Gloria squeezed my hand. It's just the first step, she whispered. But it's a big one. As I left the courtroom, Martha was waiting. She hugged me tightly. You did it, she said. Those babies are going to be okay now. But looking back at Vanessa's face, contorted with rage as she spoke with her attorney, I knew this battle was far from over. She wouldn't give up easily. And despite today's victory, rebuilding my relationship with Tommy and Emma would take time and patience. Still, for the first time since Jason's death, I felt hope, real hope, that his children would grow up in a safe, loving home. Just as he would have wanted, that first night with the twins in my home was both wonderful and heartbreaking. Emma clung to me, following me from room to room as if afraid I might disappear. Tommy kept his distance, watching us with uncertain eyes, still wrestling with guilt over his courtroom testimony. I had prepared their old rooms, the ones they used during weekend visits in happier times. Fresh sheets with dinosaur patterns for Tommy, butterflies for Emma, their favorite stuffed animals waiting on their pillows, shelves stocked with books we'd read together before everything changed. After a simple dinner, chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, comfort food they actually ate rather than pushed around their plates, I helped them with their bedtime routine. As I tucked Emma in, she grabbed my hand. Are we really staying here now? She asked, her voice small in the dim glow of her night light. For a while, yes, I answered carefully. The judge thought it would be good for you and Tommy to stay with me until some things get sorted out. Is Mommy in trouble? I measured my words, remembering what the social worker had advised. Your mommy is going through a tough time. She's getting help so she can be a better mom. Emma was quiet for a moment, then whispered, I was scared to tell the truth. I thought you'd be mad at me. I brushed her hair back from her forehead. Emma, sweetheart, I could never be mad at you for telling the truth. It was very brave. Tommy's mad at himself, she confided. He thinks he was bad for saying you were mean. I'll talk to him, I promised. Tommy's door was closed, but not fully latched. I knocked softly before pushing it open. He was sitting, cross-legged on his bed, clutching the stuffed triceratops his father had given him for his 4th birthday. "Hey, buddy," I said, keeping my distance. "Can I come in?" He nodded, not looking up. I sat on the edge of his bed, careful not to crowd. "Him," I lied, he said finally, his voice cracking. "I said you were mean, but you're not." "Tommy, look at me," I said gently. He raised his eyes reluctantly. "You were trying to protect your mom. You were scared, I understand. But I hurt your feelings." "Yes," I admitted, deciding honesty was important. "It did hurt, but I know you didn't really mean it." "Sometimes we say things we don't mean when we're afraid." His lower lip trembled. "Is Mom going to hate me now?" "Your mom could never hate you," I assured him, though I wasn't certain Vanessa was capable of the unconditional love these children deserved. "She's your mother. She just needs some time to work on herself." Tommy considered this, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Is Mom ever coming back for us?" I took a deep breath. "I don't know exactly what's going to happen," I said honestly, "but I promise you'll always be safe, and you'll always be loved." He nodded, and for the first time since I'd picked them up from the courthouse, he leaned against me, allowing a brief hug before pulling away. Progress would come in small moments like these, I realized. Trust would need to be rebuilt day by day. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm to our lives. School drop-offs and pickups, homework at the kitchen table, regular meals and consistent bedtimes. The simple stability children need to thrive. There were challenges, of course. Nightmares woke them both frequently in those early days. Tommy had occasional tantrums when frustrated, lashing out in ways that told me he'd never been taught healthier emotional outlets. Emma hoarded food in her bedroom, granola bars and apples tucked under her mattress, a heartbreaking indication of the food insecurity she'd experienced. Supervised visits with Vanessa were difficult. She would arrive bearing expensive gifts and making grand promises about the future, leaving the twins confused and emotionally drained. After each visit, we'd have setbacks, bedwetting, clinginess, behavioral issues at school. The court-appointed therapist, Dr. Chen, became our lifeline. She worked with the twins twice weekly, helping them process their complicated feelings. She also counseled me on how to provide the support they needed without undermining their relationship with their mother, difficult as that sometimes felt. "Children can love an imperfect parent," she explained during one of our sessions. "Your role isn't to replace their mother, but to provide the stability and security she currently can't." 3 months after the initial hearing, the court made its final ruling. Based on the CPS investigation, therapy reports, and Vanessa's continued erratic behavior during supervised visits, I was granted full legal custody of the twins. Vanessa would maintain visitation rights, but only under supervision until she completed court-ordered parenting classes and substance abuse treatment. She stormed out of the courtroom before the judge finished speaking, her furious gaze burning into me as she passed. That evening, as the twins and I worked in the garden Jason had helped me plant years before, Emma looked up from the carrots she was harvesting. "Grandma Sandra, are you happy that we live with you now?" I set down my trowel, giving her question the consideration it deserved. "I'm happy that you're safe and doing well," I said carefully. "I wish the circumstances were different. I wish your daddy was still here and that your mommy was able to take good care of you. But yes, having you here brings me joy." Tommy, who had been unusually quiet, joined us with a handful of cherry tomatoes. "Dad would be happy we're with you," he said with surprising certainty. "He always said you were the best mom ever." Tears pricked my eyes. "He did say that, didn't he?" "And now you're the best grandma ever," Emma added matter-of-factly. "Not mean at all." I laughed, my heart fuller than it had been in years. "Well, I don't know about that. I still make you eat your vegetables and do your homework. That's not mean, Tommy said seriously. That's just being a grown-up. 6 months turned into a year. We settled into our new normal. The twins thrived at school, made friends in the neighborhood, and gradually stopped flinching at loud noises or hoarding food. Vanessa's visits became less dramatic as her treatment progressed, though I remained vigilantly protective. On the 2nd anniversary of Jason's death, we visited his grave together. The twins placed drawings next to the flowers I'd brought. As they ran to explore a nearby magnolia tree, I sat on the bench facing Jason's headstone. "We're going to be okay," I told him softly. "It wasn't the way any of us planned, but I'm keeping my promise to take care of them." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves above me, and for a moment, I felt a deep sense of peace. This path had been more difficult than I could have imagined, filled with heartache and struggle. But watching the twins play in the dappled sunlight, their laughter carrying on the wind, I knew every painful step had been worth it. They were safe. They were loved. And somehow, against all odds, we had become a family again.